Welcome to the Resiliency Project. Here we bring you stories around resiliency and reinvention. This all began to help us get through COVID-19 and some of the struggles that we were having, and hopefully hearing these stories, it'll help you get through some of the struggles that maybe you're having with COVID-19. I'm Teddy Katz. My partner in the Resiliency Project is PJ Kwong. PJ, welcome again to the Resiliency Project.
Thank you, Teddy. Did you like my very subtle hand signal that I'm sure nobody noticed?
It was great, as always, PJ. Great to have you again, and great to have you helping with the production behind the scenes and also as co-host. And we love interaction on this program. So if you have questions or comments, please feel free to share them with PJ throughout the next hour. Now, PJ, you are a skating coach and have been for some time. You understand better than most how difficult it is for you or any member of your family to get into elite sport and to stay there and all the struggles.
Well, I certainly know about it, not firsthand, but certainly observing as a coach and then, all of the work as a journalist on figure skating, I certainly can see just how difficult it is. And, elite level athletes are a breed unto themselves.
How about if your father, your mother, your stepmother, your stepfather, your grandfather, your grandmother, and others in your family were all amateur athletes, Olympians, or professional athletes?
My family, they were just amateurs.
Yeah, me too. And to do that and to know what that life is all about and to almost feel that that was part of your destiny. Well, that was the case, and that was the story for one of the Canadian athletes to watch at next summer's Paralympics in Tokyo. Nate Riech really felt born to be in sport and almost destined to be an Olympian. But as we're going to hear today, he almost had it all taken away from him because of a freak accident when he was a child. Yet in the past 2 years, Nate has discovered Paralympic sport. He's become the world record holder in the 800 and 1500 meters in track and field in what's known as the T38 category. He closed out 2019 winning the world championship in the 1500 meters. And Nate joins us from his home in Victoria today. Well, welcome to the Resiliency Project, Nate.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's great to have you and great to hear and share some of your story. Let's start by talking about those bloodlines because it's just so fascinating and so unique. Let's start with your grandfather. Tell us a little bit about his sport and what made him so famous.
Yeah, he played hockey, I believe, for 12 years in the NHL. And he one of the things he's most notable for is that he scored 10 points in one game and 3 goals in 21 seconds. And yeah, he played for the Maple Leafs. And I remember him telling me how it was one of the greatest times of his life being there. And he's really one of the people that influenced me to compete for Canada.
That's Jim Harrison we're talking about, your grandfather. What about your your grandmother? She was also a pretty high-level athlete. Tell us a little bit about Liz Harrison.
Yeah, so Liz, she died when I was really young, but she was equestrian for Team Canada. To be fully honest with you, I haven't heard too much about her paralysis there. I'm always hoping to learn more about her. But like I said, I think she died when I was 2, so I didn't get too much experience. But I know that my mom got her competitive edge from her, and I can't even imagine how competitive she is if how competitive my mom is. So it's pretty unreal, I'm sure.
Tell us about your mom. What sport did she do?
Yeah, so she did pole vault and the 400 hurdles. Growing up, she won a youth 400 hurdles Canadian title, and then in 2000, after having me in '95, she won her pole vault national title at the Olympic trials, and she's someone who obviously has been one of the most motivating people in my life.
Now, Arden Tucker actually competed for Canada, if I'm not mistaken, at the Commonwealth Games in 2002.
Correct.
Now, your stepfather, also Ben Tucker, was also an athlete. Tell me about Ben.
Yeah, no, Ben's then played professional baseball in the Giants organization, and also in college he was they finished runner-up at the College World Series. He was, I believe, the #2 recruit in the country coming out of high school, and he was one when I played baseball early in my life. He was super impactful, and obviously he's been one of the most impactful people in my life, right beside my mother.
Your father, Todd Riech, he also was an Olympian. Tell me about Todd.
Yeah, so everyone who I meet always tells me how he was such a great athlete. In high school, he ran anything from the 100 to the 400. And actually, in high school, his junior and senior year, he won the state meet by himself. So he won the team title individually. He had no other teammates there. And then in college, he set the NCAA record in the javelin and also won an NCAA title. And in the same year, he won his NCAA title and a USA title, and was a member of the 1996 U.S. Olympic team. And I believe he finished just outside of the finals, so I think he finished 13th, but don't quote me on that.
Now, you were one, if I'm not mistaken, when he went to participate in the Olympics.
Correct.
Do you recall any of that? Obviously, you don't remember anything from when you were a kid, but any of the stories that you've heard?
Yeah, I don't recall too much. I more recall being at the track and just kind of, like I've always said, I grew up at the track. And so I kind of more just remember training sessions and me crawling or walking around the track while my parents worked out.
Your stepmother also recently went, Brittany Borman also recently went to the Olympics for the U.S. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I know. She was a 2012 and 2016 Olympian. Brittany didn't really come into my life until recently. And so I saw her training for the 2016 Olympics and really saw all that hard work that went into that. And I believe she was also a 2-time NCAA champion as well. So obviously she's been successful for some time now.
Now, we haven't talked about a few others in your family, but they were also there. I think you had an uncle in rugby for the Canadian national team. Given all of this, how much was being an Olympian and being born into sports, did that seem part of your destiny and part of your dream?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just knew nothing different. There wasn't anyone, especially in my immediate family, who didn't go to, either compete at the Olympic trials or make the games. And so, a lot of people, a lot of families have to really talk to their kids about hard work and what hard work looks like and what do you have to do to get to an elite level. It doesn't matter if it's in sport, if it's in business or education. So for me, they didn't really have, they didn't have to talk about hard work. I just saw it day in and day out, and I just tried to follow suit. And I knew I wanted to go down that path for sure, but I always wanted to put a little twist on it. I didn't think that I would be the one, or that the twist would happen for me.
What do you remember actually having some kind of dream and something that you could visualize down the road in terms of being an Olympian? Did you write it down, or like we hear stories from some Olympians like that? Anything like that for you?
Yeah, like since I was one, I thought I was going to be an Olympian in either 2016 or 2020. At that time, I didn't know what sport. I loved to run. At that point, when I got into the sport, I really started sprinting in the 100 and 200. That was just before my injury. So I thought maybe it would be that avenue, but I really wasn't too sure. I wasn't too specific growing up. I was more just trying to get in as much trouble as I could.
Were you a bit of a troublemaker?
From time to time, for sure. I think I like to give my mom a hard time, and she likes to give me a hard time, and so that's kind of how our relationship is.
You're a dual citizen. Your family grew up. You grew up in the U.S. A fair bit of your life you spent down in the U.S. What made you decide to represent Canada?
Well, I think there's three people. And the three people we've already mentioned, Jim Harrison, Liz Harrison, and my mom, Arden Tucker. I think it's most importantly to start with my mom, Arden Tucker. She was there during the dark times of my life, when we didn't know if I would be a vegetable for the rest of my life, or really what my life would be. And she never told me I couldn't do anything. She wouldn't let me say that. She said it might take you longer than normal children, but you're going to do it. And I knew that she grew up in Canada. I knew that she competed for Canada, and so that was always a goal of mine from 5 or 6, very, very young, that I wanted to compete for them. And then just the thought of my grandma Liz, just hearing the stories about how an amazing woman she was, really made me want to compete for them. And then lastly, my grandpa Jim Harrison, he has such pride for Canada. He loves Canada. And I always wanted that sense of pride for me. And, America did so many great things for me. I lived there for 23 years, but for me, it was a no-brainer to run for Canada. I think maybe my mom tried to sway me towards the U.S. just because she knew she was Canadian and didn't want to put any pressure on me. But I didn't really listen to that, and I knew I wanted to represent Canada.
You talked about some of those dark days. For those who don't know what happened, take us back to that day when your life changed, and if you could paint a picture of what you heard, what you saw, and what you felt that day, so people can understand what you went through.
Yeah, absolutely. So at that time, I was 10 years old, and I was living just outside of Phoenix, Arizona, and we ended up going to play this course because we were trying to kill some time before our tournament the next day. And as I told you, I think we were driving our parents nuts. So we decided to go play, and we reached the 7th hole.
Play golf, you're talking about.
We reached the 7th hole, and there was a group behind us, and they asked to play through. And of course, we obliged. They said, "Why don't you hit your balls and then go stand under this tree over to the left." It was about 150 yards down the fairway, and it was a really hot day in Arizona. I think it was about 120 degrees Fahrenheit. So it was definitely a very toasty day. And I remember the first person teeing up their shot and hitting it right down the fairway, and then the next person to step up to the tee, they ended up. I remember they had this SQ Nike driver that almost sounded like a trash can when you hit it. And I remember it being hit, and then I remember just a numbness coming over my body. And when something hits you that hard, you just have this numbness feeling. You almost don't even know you got hit. And I really didn't know that I got hit until I saw the weird trajectory of the golf ball kind of bounce near the fairway, and as well as the astonishing look on my teammates' faces. And then right then and there, I knew I had been struck in the head by a golf ball. And right away, my right arm kind of bolted down, and I had no feeling in my right arm. I could still squeeze my right hand. But then I called my mom and asked her to come pick me up. And she was a little bit hesitant because I had just pitched a complete game the night before, and I had been complaining about my arm being pretty sore. That night, I think she was just a little annoyed that she probably just dropped us off like an hour ago, and then we're gonna stop playing golf because my arm was sore. I don't know if she fully believed the golf ball, because it's such a 1 in a million chance getting hit with the golf ball. So she eventually came and picked us up. She started testing my hand, and I had full strength in my right hand, and so she thought, all right, well, why don't I drop Nate's friends off first, so that they don't get nervous, because young kids at hospitals, that's not a place you want to be. And so she dropped them off first. And remember, after she dropped off my second friend, I saw a concerned look in her face, and because all of a sudden I started to become fully paralyzed on the right side of my body. My face became droopy, so did my eye, my arm and leg stopped to work. And I remember we got to the hospital, and she told me to jump out of the car and go run into the emergency room. But I was dragging my right leg. I couldn't move. And I think right then and there is really when I knew something was wrong. And then we got into the hospital. I got back to my room, after waiting 10, 15 minutes. And then I started to have my seizure, my first and only seizure. But that was such a oh my gosh, what's happening moment for me. My mom ran out to grab a nurse, and I was just shaking uncontrollably. And yeah, it was a very, very tough time, because at that point I was trying to talk to tell my mom what was going on, but I thought I was talking, but I actually wasn't. No one could hear me. And then right then and there, it was like, wow, this is going to be a really long road. And my family just kept saying, you can do it. It's going to be long. It's going to be tough. We're not going to lie to you, but you can do it. The thing I didn't know is that my doctors were saying that I couldn't do it. And I didn't figure that out until I had my exit interview. Yeah, right before I was leaving the hospital.
What did they say to you, Nate?
Yeah, he said, Nate, you'll never walk without Olympian, and competitive sports are out of the question. And saying that to someone who's so competitive and comes from the family I do, I always explain it as there's two roads you can go down. One's this well-lit, easy road where there's not a lot of failure, but the success, you don't get much success. And this other road is windy, dark. There's a lot of failure, but that failure makes you into the person you are today, as well as the ups are just so amazing, because you know where you came from. And I think during those hard times, you really develop gratitude, and you just understand what it takes to reach that goal that you set out for yourself.
So was that kind of to hear those words from that doctor as you're leaving the hospital after, I think you told me before, it was about a month that you were there.
Sure.
You're dealing with this paralysis, this newness in your life. Was that kind of a defining moment for you, just based on your dream and what you saw yourself doing, and now being told, forget that, dream's never going to happen? How much of a defining moment was that for you, and what did you do as a result of that?
Yeah, I think that was the defining moment, the aha moment, as many people label it. Yeah, it was very tough. Like, I just remember that numbness feeling going over my body again, and kind of having, feeling like you have something in your throat, and just looking at my mom with kind of anger and sadness, and like, seriously, a professional is saying this. And at the time, looking back, like, that probably was people who had my injury before. It's probably, I was very lucky to have my internal bleeding stop almost randomly, and they still don't have a reason why it stopped. And but yeah, I think that has driven me till today, and it will drive me probably for the rest of my life.
I think you said to me before you were bound and determined to prove that doctor wrong.
Yeah, no, I made it my life goal to prove him wrong and show him that I can. And I don't know, I just feel like so many times when you have a disability, it doesn't matter if you're born with it, or I don't know how it is when you're born with it, or when you get it halfway through your life. It's people just write you off. And I just wanted to show, hopefully, kids who get disabilities, either when they're born or halfway through their life, that you can accomplish all the goals you have. I'm saying out to accomplish all the goals I had before I got injured. Sure, I didn't think the Paralympics would ever be an avenue that I would explore, but I am. And I haven't looked back. I'm just trying to do my best. And I think if you work towards something that's bigger than yourself, which is the Paralympic movement, then that will also get you to wake up every day motivated and looking forward to working hard.
Eddie, we have one great comment from one of our regulars, and that's Jose Lanouette, which is just talking about, Nate, this remarkable story of yours, and your ability to bring perspective to each step of what you went through. Just to talk about resiliency, Teddy. This is a definite interview for today's times.
Absolutely. And Nate, how quickly were you able to put that perspective together? Or is that something that's come lately as you got older and were able to look back on and reflect on what you went through?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that's come recently. I honestly believe I had a victim's mentality right after my injury. I think I worked really hard for a year or two, but after everyone telling you how, kind of amazing your story is, and wow, look at how far you've gone, I think sometimes that gets into your head. And so I maybe stopped working as hard as I used to. And then I recently got a sports psychologist in 2018 that works with our team, and we really reflect and did some dirty work on everything that kind of had been going on in my life. And I read Jocko Willink's Extreme Ownership book, and really taking ownership of your life. And that's really when that perspective seemed to come out. And, growing up, I gave a lot of speeches at golf tournaments, which, it just kind of made sense. And I kind of got thrown into that. I think sometimes you need to take a step back to actually realize and reflect on kind of what has gone on and what you're really trying to do with your life.
We're going to talk a little bit more about your perspective in a couple minutes. But before we get there, I want to talk about a little bit more about your journey and what happened after, that next few years after your incident and your accident. You went back to running. You eventually got back there and did prove the doctor wrong. But you didn't compete in the Paralympics. You competed against able-bodied athletes. You went to college on a scholarship to compete in track against able-bodied athletes. Why not the Paralympics?
Because I'm at that time, I remember my mom mentioning the Paralympics, but I think at that time the Special Olympics and the Paralympics weren't well defined, and so I just didn't fully understand. And I think that's one thing that as a Paralympic athlete we're trying to educate and just kind of tell people what the differences between those two are. And I think there's definitely an edge of being an able-bodied athlete and knowing deep down that, I got paralyzed. I don't have part of my brain, and I can't control part of my leg and arm, and I just beat you. And so mentally, I think that's definitely part of my edge. And really, I think you don't learn by winning. You learn by getting your butt whooped. And let me tell you, I've gotten my butt whooped by able-bodied athletes so many times, and I think that's really when you learn something about yourself.
What was the disability that you ended up sort of having as a permanent disability as a result of that incident? You mentioned brain injury and partial paralysis in your right hand side. You compete in the T38. Explain a little bit about what the T38 is.
Yeah, so first I'll just break down my disability really quick. So I got hit in the head, like I said, and I have a hole in the motor strip, which controls the whole right side of my body, as well as some of my speech. So I don't have really any function in my shoulder. My arm doesn't work well. My fine motor skills in my right hand are probably the worst out of my disability. And then my leg is weakened. And because of my paralysis, I have an anterior rotation on my front hip, which creates a even more disability when I run. And when I get really fatigued, instead of people just picking their legs up, I have to tell my leg to be picked up. And the T30s category is a lot of times it's TBI and CP. And so it ranges from severity. So I think T34 is the most severe. And then it goes all the way up to T38, which is the most, I guess you would call it functioning out of those disabilities. And they combine T37 and T38 because the disabilities are very similar. They're not the same. 37 is a little bit more severe. And so, yeah, and I think they did that to expand the fields. They also cut out the 800, so you can only run the 4 or the 15. There's no in between, so that makes the competition even tougher, which is something I think is great.
When you found Paralympic sport, and given your trajectory, your story, when you talked about that dream early on, and then kind of seeing that dream seemingly taken away from you at 10, what did it mean for you when you found Paralympic sport and you started to excel in it a couple of years ago?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I want to just take a quick step back and, sure. At the end of my college career, I didn't set out anything that I thought I was going to accomplish within my college career, and it's a very sobering conclusion to come to, that you weren't good enough because because of you. It wasn't your coach's fault. It wasn't your mom's fault. It wasn't your dad's fault. It wasn't your support staff's fault. All of the blame laid on you. And I finally came to grips with that. But I didn't want that to be how I ended my career. And so I was really looking forward to doing anything. I didn't know if it was the Olympics or the Paralympics. At that time, that was in 2017, and I ended up going back to Georgia, where my family lives, and working at a running store and just training my butt off. And that's when I started to really learn a lot about myself. I think I was in such a low in 2017. And then all of a sudden I got classified in 2018, and it almost seemed like everything made sense, because I just felt like I struggled all through college, and then that first year out of college, just trying to find my identity, not who I wish I was, not who my family wants me to be, but just who I am. And so piece by piece, I finally started to figure out who I was as a person. And after I set that first world record in 2018, and in Berlin, I set the 800 on a Saturday and 15 on a Sunday, and it almost just seemed like I got thrown in, and the lights were bright. But this had been something that I always wanted to do, and always I wanted to experience. And so that was a pretty life-changing moment for sure.
Was it almost like feeling that dream had just come back? Like suddenly that dream, which seemingly was gone, is now back in front of you?
Definitely. Part of that, and part of it was just appreciation. I fully understand that there's so many people that would like to be in my spot, and so I just want to take it as seriously as I possibly can, and just try to make an impact. Because I always say, like, if something happened to one of my siblings, I would want there to be education and a sense of protocol for them to get back to sport, because I think sport is the best metaphor for life. And if you take away sport from someone because they look different or they move different, I think that is just horrible. And so there's so many people before me that have made such a big impact, and I just want to do my part.
When you won the world championship, you mentioned setting world records in the 800 and the 15, and you win the world championship. There's a picture of you kind of where I think you've told me you were yelling at the top of your lungs. Tell me about the emotions that you were feeling then, and why.
Yeah, so if you don't mind, I'll just break down the race a little bit.
Sure.
So we had a plan to go with 600 meters left in the race, but I ended up getting tripped at 750 meters and almost fell on my face. And so I kind of said, let's do this. Probably some different words in my head. And so I just took off, and I'm sure I gave my coach, Heather Henninger, a complete heart attack by taking off that far. But I kind of, smelled blood, and I was like, all right, let's do this thing. And I knew I don't know if this is selfish, but I knew I was in the best shape in that, out of everyone in that race. I had run the fastest. And so I didn't want it to come down to speed at the end. I wanted to actually come down to fitness. And so with 400 meters to go, I kind of knew I had it. With 100 meters to go, I was like, wow, like I had like 30 meters on everyone. And I remember saying to myself, Nate, don't scream when you go over the line. There's a lot of great competitors in this race. And then right as I crossed the line, I think it was just so much emotion came out of me, because one of the competitors in my race is Michael McKillop, and might be one of the best Paralympic athletes of all time. He has 4 Paralympic titles, 8 world titles, and actually that was the first time he had ever lost in Paralympic competition. And so I think I just heard everyone saying that I couldn't beat him, and I think all of that emotion just drained out of me in that moment.
It's such an amazing story, as we're talking about here, Nate, and the trajectory, your journey. You had that great success at the World Championship, and then you were hoping right about this time to be in Tokyo, trying to follow that up at the Paralympics, which of course has now been postponed for a year because of COVID-19. How difficult was that for you to have those games postponed because of what the world is going through right now?
Yeah, I feel like it came in waves and it came in phases. Initially, when Athletics Canada or Team Canada had come out that they were pulling out of the games, that was the lowest moment for me personally, because you just think about, like, I was on a roll, and then that's kind of been being taken away from me, because at first I thought that the games were going to go on, because I didn't know the severity of the virus, and so I thought they were going to go on, and I just wasn't going to be a part of it. As I always do, I called my mom. Her and I had a long conversation, and at first, prior to the conversation, I just had this numb, blank feeling as I stared at the white walls in my room, and just really wasn't feeling a lot. I was just numb. I just felt like I wasn't like in my body. It was almost like I felt like I was out of my body kind of experience. And then after talking to my mom, she just one reason why I love my mom, and one reason why she's been so impactful in my life, is that she's so honest. She doesn't sugarcoat anything, and she just tells me how it is. And so we just started to think, like, what's next. And then the next couple of calls, I talked to my stepdad a little bit on that call, and I talked to my coach Heather, and then some of my teammates. And so we, after that kind of 48 hours, we just started saying, what's next? And if you think about it, like, I have so many weaknesses when it comes to running. Like obviously, usually you're like really good either at speed or the endurance side, and speed is more of what I'm naturally talented with, but my endurance lacks quite a bit. And I do have goals within the able-bodied scene as well. And so we said, why don't we take this year to experiment a little bit, try some things that we would never try in a Paralympic year. And that ended up paying huge dividends down the road, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but had some really good time trials about a month ago. And those races are solely by myself. And so I think I just really dove into the process. This is like one of the first times where I wasn't worried about a result, but I was just focused on getting the best out of myself every day and really finding enjoyment in the process. Does that mean, do I drive 10 minutes farther to go do a new run where there's not a lot of people? And so that's kind of how I dove into getting through the pandemic.
We actually have a question from Jose Lanouette, who joins us regularly, asking how you're able to train during the pandemic. I'm sure that took on a real different twist for you. What was the hardest thing that you had to go through on that front?
Yeah, I think there's two hard things for me. The first, I couldn't lift, which was tough. Because of my disability, that's a very important part of my training. It's not like what you think of as heavy lifting, but it's a lot of like single leg balance work. Who is written? It's all written by my therapist Sandeep and my uncle Trevor Harrison, and it's really only for me. It's so specialized, and so it was tough to not have access to weights to be able to do that program, as well as not having my coach and teammates on the track with me, because my coach Heather Henninger is the national coach, and so there was even more hoops than having a normal coach to get back to training. So yeah, I basically just got a program, and in Victoria, the pandemic never got bad. I think the track was only closed for a week. And for me, I was really not on the track. A lot of it was all on the trails. And so, I just kind of dove into that training, and actually, all of my training partners retired. So, I have no training partners now. I kind of just solo. So it just kind of gave me, to learn what I kind of need to work on, when I'm training alone now.
When you talk about the time trials and feeling like you're actually pushing yourself in new ways, tell us a little bit more about that. Like, do you feel like you're almost in better shape now than you've been at previous times in your career?
I know I am. It's the nice thing about track is that the clock doesn't lie. And I just think my mind is so much better than it was in the past. I've really dove into mindfulness and working with my sports psych, and yeah, I just feel like that used to be one of the handicap on my performance, and now I feel like it's my edge. And so that's one thing that we really dove into. I think just like finding out, like I said earlier, find out who you are is just so important, so that you don't have to put this facade on. You don't have to just say certain things that you think people want to hear. You can just be you. And that's, I think, the training is super important, but if you can't go out there and execute and have the focus to execute, then it doesn't matter how great a shape you are in.
How much inspiration, Nate, do you get by some of the times that we're seeing by some of Canada's Olympians right now in your event in the 1500 meters? There's been some amazing performances over the last little while. How much inspiration does that give you?
Yeah, I don't know if it's inspiration or it's specifically Mo Ahmed is the one who threw down the 12:47, which was a huge Canadian record. And I think it just, in my head, it just says game on. Like let's do this thing. Let's show the world that Canadian athletes can compete on the highest of levels across the field, across all sports, not just in hockey. And so that's something that's been, I think a long time coming. I think, there's a lot of things that are in place now. And, but yeah, definitely, I think it helped with my 7-second personal best in the 3,000 meter. I'm sure it gave me a little jump when I was hurting with 400 meters to go. And, when that voice is telling you to slow down and you usually never listen to it. So yeah, Mo's definitely, been impactful in my training over these last couple of months for sure.
Now, this program, Nate, is all about resilience and reinvention and on the Resiliency Project. I'm curious what those two words mean to you personally from your experience.
I think resilience to me means adapting when things don't go how they're planned or how you think they're going to go. Because, one thing is that, yeah, I think my injuries definitely, there's been resilient moments, but I think a lot of people, have those moments in their life. And so I think they can really connect with my story because, everyone has those lows and those hard times where it doesn't matter if it's financially, physically, mentally, where things are just really tough. And I think just, everyone loves a good comeback, and that's what resilience is in my mind. For me, like, I don't say like, oh, my story is this amazing. I just hope it can help people, because at the end of the day, there are stories that helped me when I was at my darkest times.
What's interesting, Nate, you talked earlier about perspective that you've gotten in the last few years, and you've talked to me about some of the guiding principles that you live your life by, which I think will be helpful for people watching today. So I want you to elaborate a little bit on what you call your gray wolf mentality. And we're going to get into why you call it that in a second. But first of all, your road to resilience is this gray wolf mentality. Take us through your six pillars of your mentality.
Yeah. Relentlessness is kind of the backbone of everything, and that comes from Kobe Bryant. Just just go at it like it's your last day on earth. And that's kind of the way I try to approach it, and just know that there's no end. At the end of the day, you just need to keep getting better at your craft or one's craft. And that's always been super important to me. And I've had very successful athletes kind of share that with me. And I think the most important one is giving back, because I wouldn't have been able to recover in my environment if it wasn't for fundraising, Children's Miracle Network. And so that's kind of the top for me. And then 3 and 4, attention to detail and lean into adversity, is they connect very well and are probably the most important to performance. Because if you don't take attention to detail, then you won't learn from your failures. And if you can't learn from your failures, then what's the point in failing? Then you're failing backwards, not failing forward. And so that's extremely important as in lean into adversity. If you're a younger kid and you listening to this, unfortunately, you're gonna have adversity throughout your life, and that's one thing that is for sure. It's gonna be, you just have to learn how to roll with the punches. And for me, that took a long time. When I used to get injured, I used to get really frustrated and cry and be so upset. But now I look at it as a challenge, and it actually motivates me. And it's just trying to figure out those little things and just figure out what your edge is. And these 5 and 6 is what has made me into who I am today, and isolation and failure. And I think one thing I love is going up to altitude, being by myself, training by myself. And I feel like you just learn so much about yourself. I feel like the most important conversations you're ever going to have is with yourself. Because you can't turn your mind off. You have to live with that permanently. And so that's something that I recently have really took on to part of my mentality. And then failure. I've failed so many times. It's not even funny. I've been on my knees, thinking what the heck is going on. And yeah, I think failure is maybe the most impactful thing on my career, and why I set those 2 world records initially, because I felt like for 6 years constantly. And I finally decided to reflect and learn on it. And that's why I was able to kind of burst on the scene.
You also, Ted, told me, in addition to your gray wolf mentality that you just talked about, your 6 guiding principles, you also keep a list of people that you look up to as role models and some of the characteristics that they have. I wonder if you could give us an example of that and why that's so important for you.
Yeah. So one person who is really impactful to me is Blake Griffin. He's been someone who you would never think would reach out to me, or him and I would have a conversation, and just seeing how much he pays attention to my career. And I think one thing that I really love about Blake is that he's he really cares about his sport, and he's really focused on what he has to do, and he's a great person off the track. I always feel like a lot of times your legacy is a lot off the track as well. Like yes, I can turn left and run fast, but can I make an impact, a lasting impact? And I want those people around me. And I think in Canada, Melissa Bishop is kind of the first one that rings up for me right away. And she's done so much for the sport within Canada, but the way she holds herself is just so unbelievable. I was with her at a training camp, and she took the time, out of her training to have a quick conversation with me. And, it doesn't matter who comes up to her. She always reacts the same way. And that's something I hope to be able to throw in my palette and have part of my off the track personality.
You talk about Melissa Bishop, of course, being a Canadian track star. For those who don't know, Blake Griffin, also a star in the NBA. How do you connect, or how did you connect with Blake, just so that people understand where that came from?
Yeah, so my uncle is his physio, and I've spent many trips hanging out with Blake. So it's been really, really cool experience. We talk from time to time, and he's checked on me a couple of times during COVID, and so that's kind of how we connected. And he's just been following my results, and I think it's really cool to see someone who's such at his stature, is interested in the Paralympic movement. I look forward to having more conversations with him about how he thinks we could possibly grow this movement and expand our reach. And I think personally, for me, I think education is one of the most important things, because I just don't think people fully understand how high level us Paralympic athletes are. So I think we just need to say that in maybe more volume or in a better way.
Why has that become so important to you? You mentioned early on you didn't go towards Paralympic sport until very late in your career in the last 2 years, and now it's become something that you want to highlight to the world, to Canada and to the world, just how you can help promote the Paralympics and the Paralympic stories. Tell us why that's now become so important for you.
Well, it's just become my why. I mean, I think running has, at first my why was I just wanted to run fast and beat as many people as I could. And now it's evolved to, I just want to make an impact. And I think it really comes down to, if this avenue wasn't there for me, then I don't know what I would be doing. And I think I would have extreme regret, to be fully honest with you, that I didn't get to accomplish the things that I really wanted to accomplish. And so, and I just think Paralympic stories are so unbelievable. And I'm not talking about my story. I'm talking about all the different classifications. And I just feel like everyone has such a interesting, impactful perspective story. And that's why I started my podcast. It's because there's so many amazing perspectives to learn. And I've just been trying to really, the main part is just to learn, just to sit back, ask some questions, and just let them tell me about their journey and their really road to Tokyo.
Do you focus mostly on Paralympic athletes on your podcast, which, by the way, you call Strides with Grey Wolf, and we have your address down there so people can check it out. But tell us a little bit about the athletes that you've been interviewing there.
Yeah, thus far it's just been Paralympic athletes, but like anything, I don't want to put a cap on anything. Whoever wants to come on, if there's a couple coaches, or if Carla Nichols, who's the para lead, or if Blake wants to come on, or if there's some more able-bodied track and field athletes that want to come on, I always welcome it, because we can learn from them as well. And I think when you exclude a certain group of people, then you're capping your learning, and that's definitely not a good thing. And I've interviewed a couple Canadians, Tom Normandeau and Austin Ingram, who were on both on the national team for the 2019 World Championships. Then Ezra French, who is a amputee from the States. He's 15 and already has a Pan Am medal, which is pretty outstanding. And then I interviewed Jerry Clifford, who's personally one of my favorite. I call him the champ. He was double gold medalist at the 2019 World Championships. He's in the T12 category and the blind category. And he's actually competed at the able-bodied World Juniors, which is a huge step. And him and I really align on a lot of the movement topics, as well as crossing over from para and able-bodied.
Now, you've talked to me about wanting to help develop the sport as well in Canada and around the world, but particularly things like development camps and trying to get maybe Blake on board to help you with that. Tell me a little bit about what you're hoping to do there and why.
Yeah, I just think youth is so important. These stepping stones to getting to the top. And a lot of times I think they see Brent Lakatos winning gold at the Paralympic Games, or Greg Stewart winning silver at the 2019 World Championships, and they want to get there, but they don't know how. And I just don't think we have a lot of good development programs put in place. And obviously we need funds to do that. And so, yeah, that's definitely something I'm in the process at looking at right now. And I just think the youth is so important, because a lot of times we just kind of forget about them until the World Championships or the Paralympic Games. But there has to be stepping stones for them to evolve as athletes and as people. And so I saw that gap, and that gap had been highlighted by many people. David, the CEO of Athletics Canada, David Bedford, him and I have had some great conversations, and just him also saying this is a spot where I see it being a hole and we need to fix that. And so as I have learned over the last couple of years, things don't happen at a snap of your finger. It's a process, and it takes some time. And so I think for a long time I would talk about it a lot, but I wouldn't do action. And so that's why I started my podcast. I kind of got sick of just talking about it and not actually doing action.
You call your podcast Strides with Grey Wolf, and you call your mentality the Grey Wolf mentality. Tell us about where that name comes from and why it's so significant for you.
Yeah, so it's actually my middle name, and the heritage is from my biological dad's side. They're Native American, Flathead, and my great grandma is full blood Flathead Indian, and so yeah, that's where it comes from, and I've always been super prideful of that, and so I just kind of ran with it. I think when I was growing up, I was a little bit unsure about my middle name, but I think as I got older, I just loved it, and so I just kind of ran with it. And as you can see, all my social media handles all involve Grey Wolf, and almost all my profile pictures involve Grey Wolf as well. And it's just been something that I'm super proud to be Native American, and I just like to show that.
What's your ultimate goal as we wrap up for today? What's your ultimate goal, Nate?
To inspire and motivate the next generation of Paralympic athletes, and I think some of that is on the track. Some of that is winning a gold medal. But at the end of the day, I only race to win, and I am going to go to the Paralympics and go to win and try to set a world record. And at the end of the day, I might finish first or I might finish sixth. But I just want to show athletes that you need to go after your dreams. And if I'm telling my siblings to go after their dreams, but I'm not going after mine, then what's the point?
Well, thanks for joining us here, Nate. This has been an incredible 1 hour just learning about your journey, sort of following you on your path to Tokyo. We really appreciate you taking the time and wish you the best of luck over the next year.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I hope you guys stay safe and healthy.
Thank you, Nate. Nate Riech joined us from Victoria, where he now lives and trains. Thanks to Nate for joining us. Thanks to you for joining us as well. Please share our video with your friends, like our Think Redefined Facebook page, my Teddy Katz YouTube channel. Help us spread the word about the Resiliency Project and some of the great stories of Canadian athletes on the road to Tokyo. Please join us again in a couple of weeks for another great story of resilience and reinvention here on the Resiliency Project. Thanks to PJ, my colleague. Bye for now.